How do you build a warm home in a place where fire can't save you, where the sun vanishes for half the year, and the ground beneath your feet freezes as hard as poured concrete? Somewhere in the high Arctic, long before the first furnace was ever lit, human beings stood face to face with that exact question, and they didn't just survive the answer, they engineered it. What they built was not a house. It was something far more precise and far more dangerous than that simple word could ever hold. Because at 40 degrees below zero, the Arctic doesn't feel like a place at all. It behaves like a machine, calm, indifferent, and brutally efficient at one single task, drawing the heat out of anything still alive. And here is the part almost everyone gets wrong. The true enemy was never the cold itself. It was motion. It was the wind. When fast-moving air races across a surface, it doesn't simply pass by. It reaches in and strips away the thin, invisible layer of warmth clinging to skin, to clothing, to everything. Scientists today call it forced convection. The people who lived here had no such word. They only knew that death could arrive faster than a body could ever replace what it lost. And yet, somehow, inside these structures, something impossible was unfolding. A child could exhale, and the breath would not freeze. A soft golden light glowed steadily through the endless polar night, while the world outside screamed at 100 degrees colder. The way they created that one quiet moment goes against nearly everything you believe about survival because they didn't build against the cold. They made a deal with it. So what exactly was that deal? To understand it, you first have to understand why every instinct we carry about building a home falls apart up here. In almost every other corner of the world, shelter follows one simple rule: raise walls, burn fuel, and pour heat into a space faster than it escapes. It's a system built on constant input energy flowing in to replace what is always flowing out. But in the high Arctic, that logic doesn't just weaken, it collapses entirely. There are no forests on the horizon, no timber to shape into beams, no fallen wood to feed a fire through the long dark, and without fuel, heat cannot be sustained. A structure raised proudly on the open surface isn't a refuge at all. It's a thin shell standing alone against an infinite heat sink, an environment so vast and so cold that it swallows warmth endlessly and gives nothing back. Energy simply bleeds outward into the dark until there is nothing left. So instead of building upward, these people made a quieter, far more calculated move. They went down, not deep, not hidden away in some buried cavern just 3 feet into the earth. It sounds almost too small to matter. But in the Arctic, those 3 feet change everything. Above the surface, the air is chaos, plunging from 40 below to 60 below in a single night. Yet just beneath that frozen skin of soil, the physics shift. The ground steadies. It holds close to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, the freezing point of water, not warm, not comfortable, but survivable. That narrow band, that fragile margin between freezing and death, became the foundation of everything that followed. And what's most striking is that no single genius ever designed this. No architect drew a plan. This knowledge was inherited, passed down through countless generations, encoded not in blueprints but in custom, in memory, in the patient wisdom of a people who learned the land by living inside it. But stepping out of the cold's chaos only traded one enemy for another, a quieter one you could never see coming until it was already too late. That unseen enemy was the wind, but before they could face it, they had to solve the deeper problem hiding inside those 3 feet of frozen ground. Modern builders fight the cold with insulation, fiberglass, foam, layered barriers designed to slow the escape of heat. But insulation has one quiet limitation. It doesn't store warmth. It doesn't steady a space. It only delays the inevitable. What these Arctic builders understood reached far beyond that, a principle we call thermal mass. To them, the permafrost was never an obstacle to dig through. It was a resource, a vast, silent reservoir of energy that absorbs heat slowly, releases it slowly, and above all resists sudden change. In a world that swings from 40 below to 60 below in hours, that resistance is everything. By pressing their shelter into that dense frozen mass, they turned the walls into something no thin barrier could ever be, extensions of the earth itself, immense, immovable, and constant. Inside, the temperature stopped echoing the chaos above. It settled. It steadied. It became that rarest thing in the Arctic, predictable. But the wind was still out there, and the wind is destructive because it creates pressure. When high-speed air slams into a wall, it doesn't just pass, it reorganizes. A zone of high pressure builds on the windward face while a vacuum forms behind it, and that imbalance becomes a force that reaches into the smallest seams and drags the warm air out through gaps too fine for any eye to see. This is how heat truly disappears, not in dramatic bursts, but in silent, endless theft. So what if the wind had nothing to grab? No flat wall, no sharp corner, no edge to strike. By keeping the profile low and shaping the roof into a smooth dome, they erased the wind's leverage completely. The air no longer collided with the structure, it flowed over it, following the curve, slipping past without resistance. The pressure difference vanished, the suction died, and the house became invisible to the storm. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened inside. Silence. Outside, the wind howled across the ice with nothing left to tear at, while within those curved walls, a deep stillness settled over everything, the strange, profound calm of being safe in the heart of chaos. It was no accident that the shape echoed the language of the land itself. The drift of wind-blown snow, the burrow of the Arctic fox, the dome of a den. They hadn't fought nature, they had listened to it. Yet even with the heat held and the wind defeated, a more fundamental problem still remained, because the one material the rest of the world uses to define space, to span a roof and shape a room, simply did not exist here. In a place with no trees, the answer could not come from the land, so it came from the sea. A single bowhead whale carries within it tens of tons of what can only be called natural architecture. A skeleton evolved over millions of years to endure crushing pressure, relentless force, and the constant motion of a frozen ocean. Those bones were not random shapes. They were engineered by nature herself. The long, curved jawbones became arches. And an arch is one of the most remarkable forms ever discovered, because it doesn't resist weight by stiffening against it. It redirects that weight, channeling stress outward and turning a crushing load into pure compression. Arranged into a dome, these great bones could bear the weight of snow, of packed earth, of time itself. The ribs were woven into a lattice, the broad shoulder blades set to seal the gaps between them, and every single piece had a purpose. Nothing was decoration, nothing was wasted. And then there was the binding that held it all together, baleen, the long, fibrous plates from the whale's mouth, a material that should have shattered in the cold, but did the opposite. Where most things grow brittle and crack in sub-zero air, baleen tightened. As the temperature fell, the lashings contracted and pulled the entire framework into greater and greater stability, locking bone to bone, so that under the weight of snow and the push of the wind, the structure could flex just enough to absorb the strain and then return, unbroken, to its original form. But to see this only as clever engineering is to miss the heart of it. That whale did not merely shelter them, it had fed them, lit their lamps, clothed their children, and now its very bones rose above their heads to hold back the Arctic night. To the people who built these homes, the ancestors of the Thule and the Inuit, who raised true winter houses of whalebone and earth across the top of the world, the hunt was never conquest. It was a sacred exchange, bound by gratitude, by the conviction that nothing taken from a living thing should ever be wasted. They did not just live beside the whale, they lived within it, and by now the structure had become nearly perfect, heat held, wind defeated, every weakness sealed. But perfection had quietly opened a door to a new kind of danger, one that made no sound and gave no warning, one you would only feel when it was already far too late. That silent danger was the air itself. Inner space sealed this tightly against the cold. Every breath slowly tips the balance. Oxygen falls, carbon dioxide rises, and most dangerous of all, carbon monoxide, colorless, odorless, giving no warning at all, builds quietly from the very oil lamp that is their only source of heat and light. The structure built to preserve life had also created the perfect conditions to end it. To survive their own design, they had to master something even more elusive than heat, the movement of air. And so the ventilation was never left to chance, it was engineered. The entrance sat low, near the floor, while a small vent opened high, near the crown of the dome. Between them, a gentle pressure gradient formed, so the warm, lighter air rose and slipped out through the top, while cool, fresh air was drawn in below to take its place, a slow, continuous, invisible cycle. The house breathed. And in that breathing, it kept them alive. Now think back to that child whose breath did not freeze, that steady golden glow in the endless polar night. This is how it was possible. With nothing but a single carved stone lamp burning seal oil, these homes held an interior near 70 degrees Fahrenheit, while the world outside stayed locked at 40 below, a difference of more than 100 degrees, achieved with no furnace, no electricity, no factory-made material. Only geometry, mass, and a precise understanding of how energy moves through space. And at the center of it all sat the quillic, the crescent stone lamp, tended through the long darkness by the woman of the household, who trimmed its flame of moss with such care that it gave warmth without smoke the steady heart of the home. Around that small light a family gathered, faces warm, safe inside a dome of bone and earth while the storm raged on, powerless, beyond the walls. This was never primitive survival. It was applied physics, executed with nothing but instinct and natural resources, a structure designed not to dominate the environment, but to cooperate so completely with it that the frozen world itself became part of the solution. And perhaps that is the lesson we still struggle to grasp. In a modern age that measures strength by how much energy we consume, they proved something quieter and far more profound. That survival was never about how much power you could burn, but about how precisely you understood it. If a home like this could rise from nothing but earth, bone, and instinct, then what else have we misunderstood about the past, and what other forgotten wisdom is still out there, waiting in the silence, for someone to start looking again?